Hey guys, tonight we are stepping into a very different world. A world that is technically only a century behind you, yet feels like something out of a sepia-toned photograph. You are standing in the middle of an American street in the early 1920s, and I promise you probably would not survive 5 minutes here. Not because of crime or famine, no, but because crossing the street is an Olympic sport. Cars honk, horses neigh, and pedestrians dart about with the casual bravery of people who haven't yet invented car insurance. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. It's always a joy to know someone somewhere is drifting off to sleep to my rambling history. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take a slow breath, and the first thing that hits you is the smell. Oil, coal, smoke, horse manure, and hot metal all swirled together like a cologne no marketing team would dare to bottle. You step onto cobblestones, uneven beneath your shoes, and already you feel a vibration, the low growl of a Ford Model T sputtering down the street. It coughs and chokes like it just ran a marathon with bronchitis, but somehow it keeps moving. Around you, more of these boxy machines rattle past. They look less like cars and more like tin cans with ambitions. And they are everywhere. But here's the catch. You cannot rely on neat little painted lanes or glowing traffic lights to keep you safe. Those are still novelties. The first electric traffic signal only showed up in 1914, and most towns haven't caught on yet. So the rule of the road, whoever shouts loudest and doesn't die, wins. That's it. Crossing the street feels like playing real-life Frogger, only instead of starting over with an extra life, you just don't, of course. Not everyone is sold on these noisy contraptions. Horses are still clopping by, carriages still rumble. Farmers wag their heads, muttering that automobiles are a passing fad. Some folks swear cars will never replace a good horse, and honestly, looking at the way the Model T constantly breaks down, you might almost agree. Historians still debate just how quickly the car truly conquered American roads. Was it a sudden revolution, or more of a slow, dusty takeover? Either way, you were caught in the messy overlap, where a horse might rear at a backfiring engine, sending the street into chaos, while a boy selling newspapers laughs at the drama. You glance at him, barely 12, cap tilted, voice cracking as he shouts headlines about the latest scandal. No TikTok here, just lungs and stubbornness. You wonder how many kids had their childhoods traded for wages, and the answer is quite a lot. Child labor laws existed on paper, but in practice, the streets told a different story. You watch him dodge between wheels like a professional stuntman. OSHA would have a stroke. The fashion catches your eye, two men in flat caps and wool suits, even when the sun beats down. Women balancing long coats, skirts brushing dusty street corners. Not exactly Nobody here is wearing yoga pants while sipping iced coffee. You almost pity them, almost. But then you catch a woman striding by with cropped hair. A daring bob that makes the older ladies purse their lips like they've bitten into lemons. The flapper look is just arriving, and you can feel the tension. Fashion as rebellion, and while you're busy staring, a horn blares right in your face. A driver leans out, yelling words that would sound familiar even a century later. Road rage, it seems, is timeless. The car sputters past, leaving behind a black puff of exhaust that clings to your throat. No catalytic converters yet. You cough, wiping soot from your sleeve, thinking longingly of your modern world with emissions standards. Then again, maybe not that longingly, considering rush hour traffic still exists for you too. There's a strange beauty in the chaos. The noise blends into a rhythm, the clip-clop of hooves, the hiss of steam, the crank of engines. A street corner preacher lifts his voice above it all, promising salvation to anyone who listens, while a jazz tune trickles from a distant phonograph in a shop window. This is a world trying to decide what it wants to be, half old, half new, and entirely unpredictable. You watch a policeman step into the street, hand raised like a conductor halting an orchestra. Miraculously, everyone obeys, cars jerking to a halt, horses tossing their heads. For a brief moment, order. Then, as he steps aside, pandemonium resumes. If you're thinking, why not traffic lights? Remember, those are just catching on, and many cities consider them a waste of money. Some even think people won't trust machines to tell them when to stop. Yes, the same people who trusted horses not to spook at fireworks. As you move along the sidewalk, the storefronts are alive with neon signs. A new word for a new glow. Neon had just begun its American journey in the early 1920s, and it quickly became a symbol of modernity. The lights flicker, humming faintly, casting reds and blues onto the wet stones. It feels futuristic, though the future here is only a few blocks deep before it dissolves into gas lamps again. A streetcar rumbles by, sparks flashing overhead, passengers packed in tight. Some cling to the side as it trundles along. You feel the wind whip your face, sharp with soot. Public transport is cheap, yes, but not exactly OSHA approved either. Another reminder that life 100 years ago was an ongoing experiment, often conducted on human bodies. And yet, despite the mess, people smile. Lovers stroll arm in arm, kids chase each other around wagons, workers pause at a lunch stand for a hot dog. The city breathes, alive in all its grit and glory. You find yourself lulled not by silence, but by the strange rhythm of it all. You inhale again, letting the smoky air fill your lungs. And maybe, just maybe, you start to feel comfortable here. The street is loud, dangerous, and unregulated, but it has a charm. It's a living heartbeat of America a century ago, caught between hoofbeats and engine sputters, between old rules and new inventions. You step forward, blending into the crowd, your shoes echoing against stone and dirt. The world keeps moving, and so do you, carried deeper into this strange, restless time. You step off that noisy street, the Model Ts still grumbling in your ears, and suddenly the world narrows to the swish of fabric. Clothing is everywhere. You can't help but notice it, because, in 1920s America, what you wear isn't just fabric on your body, it's a declaration, a scandal, sometimes even a battle cry wrapped in silk and sequins. Older men shuffle past in their stiff collars and sober wool suits, starched so hard you'd think breathing was optional. Their wives trail behind in long skirts that brush the pavement, hats that seem determined to swallow their entire heads. The air smells faintly of mothballs and perfume powder, the kind of scent that clings to grandmothers' attics. They walk like they own the century because, well, until very recently, they did. And then, like a drumbeat you weren't expecting, you spot her. Short hair, bobbed, cropped, cut right above the chin, like she's declared war on Rapunzel. A dress that doesn't scrape the floor, doesn't even reach her ankles. but swings scandalously free at the knee. Pearls dangle, beads glitter, and when she laughs, it's sharp, daring. The sound of someone who has decided rules are just gentle suggestions. Flappers, they call them. Women who dress like rebellion itself stitch their hems. And the older generation gasps because legs, yes, actual legs, are visible in public. Imagine the outrage. Kneecaps as national scandal. Today you scroll past thousands of photos of people barely dressed at all, and nobody faints in shock. But in 1920, a knee was enough to summon a church sermon. There's rhythm here too, in the movement of fabric. You notice that flapper dresses aren't just shorter, they're looser, freer. Corsets, the medieval torture devices disguised as fashion, are tossed aside, and instead the body is allowed to breathe. Can you imagine? Breathing as a fashion statement. The older ladies mutter about fallen morals, but you suspect, deep down, they're jealous of how much easier it is to sit down when your ribcage isn't in a vice. As you drift closer, you overhear gossip. The flappers aren't just about fashion, they smoke in public, sip cocktails without waiting for permission, even dance with men they aren't married to. A cigarette dangling from crimson lips is more than tobacco, it's rebellion, smouldering in plain sight. Every puff says, "Your rules don't own me anymore." Historians still debate whether flappers were truly revolutionaries, or just a stylish fad for a privileged few. Did they really change the role of women, or did they just make headlines while most women kept scrubbing floors and raising children? The truth is slippery, as fashion always is. But in this moment, in this dimly lit jazz club, watching the fringe of her dress shimmy under the glow of electric bulbs, you feel the ground shifting. Music helps too. The Charleston pulses through the air, syncopated beats daring you to keep up. Shoes slap against wooden floors, beads swing, laughter rises. For the first time, youth culture is announcing itself loudly, brazenly, and without an apology. You glance back to the older couples, their eyes wide with horror, as if they've stumbled into a future they didn't ask for. It's almost funny because in a way, you realize every generation looks at the next one and thinks civilization is ending. But flappers aren't the only story here. Conservative clothing still dominates most small towns and quiet streets. Outside the buzzing cities, women still stitch hems that brush the floor, hair still coiled in buns that never see the scandal of scissors. Progress moves unevenly, like a train that barrels forward in some places and barely leaves the station in others. And yet, fashion is infectious. A young girl in a rural town cuts her hair a little shorter than her mother approves. A boy ditches his stiff collar for a soft one, daring to look modern. A jazz tune on the radio carries with it the suggestion of something freer, wilder. Change slips in quietly, sometimes in the hemline of a dress. There's also the practical side. Shorter dresses mean less fabric, and after a world war that consumed resources, practicality is almost fashionable. Silk, once a luxury, now battles with rayon, a shiny new synthetic that promises glamour for less. Imagine the joy glamour that doesn't cost a fortune. Today you call it fast fashion. Back then, it was the miracle of rayon. And of course, there's always irony. The same society that clutches its pearls about scandalous flapper knees happily markets beauty products to keep women, buying creams, powders, and lipsticks. The 1920s are as much about consumption as they are about rebellion. If freedom could be bottled and sold, someone already has a store display ready. You lean back, taking it all in. The conservative world clinging to the past, the daring world sprinting toward the future. Somewhere between them, ordinary people trying to figure out what to wear tomorrow without sparking a scandal at Sunday dinner. You notice the flapper again. Her laugh bright against the smoky air, her dress catching the glow of the lamps. She's dancing not just against the music, but against the entire weight of tradition. And whether she's remembered as a revolutionary or just a fashionable trend, you can't help but feel the air shift when she moves. And then, as the song winds down, the beat softening, you realize the world of fashion is never just about fabric. It's about power, freedom, rebellion, and sometimes, yes, about shocking your grandparents. The room quiets. The dancers catch their breath, and the glow of pearls fades into the hush of the night. You leave behind the smoky jazz club, pearls still shimmering faintly in your mind, and wander into the quieter world of the American home. The sound of trumpets fades, replaced by something softer, more domestic. A doorway creaks, and inside, the future has begun to glow. Electric light, tiny filaments trapped in glass, hums faintly overhead. It is a strange light, brighter and cleaner than the flicker of oil lamps, but not yet as steady as the bulbs you know today. You can see the room more clearly, every shadow pushed back with almost smug efficiency. Of course, not every house enjoys this miracle yet. In rural areas, kerosene lamps still rule, their smoky flames staining the walls, reminding everyone that electricity is a luxury, not a guarantee. Imagine cooking dinner while squinting through smoke, when across town someone else is already bragging about the miracle of a light switch. And yet, the arrival of electricity changes everything. Rooms feel different. The rhythm of the day bends. Darkness used to dictate life work when the sun rose, sleep when it set. Now, with a flick of the switch, people steal hours from the night. Reading after sunset becomes easier, knitting continues longer. Arguments over the evening paper last into hours once reserved for dreams. One could say Americans began buying time itself, rented hour by hour from the new gods of wires and bulbs. Still, the system is imperfect. Power surges, bulbs burn out quickly, wires hiss. You glance at the ceiling, half expecting sparks. Today, you grumble when the Wi-Fi drops for 30 seconds. But in the 1920s, a storm could plunge an entire neighborhood into darkness, and nobody got a refund in. The living room, you notice something humming. A radio, tall and boxy, would polish to a warm shine. Families gather around it as if it were a hearth, except instead of flames, it offers voices from hundreds of miles away. Presidents speak, preachers preach, jazz musicians play, all carried on invisible waves that feel almost magical. A child stares at it, wide-eyed, as though the wooden box itself is alive. And perhaps it is, because never before has information traveled so fast. Straight into the home, free of train schedules or newspaper ink. The first broadcasts are shaky. Sometimes static swallows entire sentences. Antennas must be adjusted with the patience of saints. But still, people sit, listening, together. In an age before glowing screens devoured every private corner, the radio pulls families into the same room. It dictates when they laugh, when they hush, when they lean forward as a vaudeville joke arrives, crackling through the static. Imagine binge listening, except the episode comes only when the station decides. You had no pause button, no rewind, just a shared trust in the hum of the wires. Electricity also sneaks into kitchens. A lucky few boast of toasters, machines that brown bread with sizzling precision. Others by electric irons, banishing the coal-heated lumps of iron their mothers once cursed. It sounds mundane now, but in those moments, these devices whispered of futures where machines, not tired hands, did the work. And yet, many homes remain halfway between centuries. Step into a farmhouse and you might see a lamp burning low, a washboard leaning against a wall, and in the corner, a brand new electric fan buzzing bravely against the summer heat. It is a patchwork of eras, old habits stitched to new technology. Progress rarely arrives evenly. Some families embrace the switch, others cling to the flame. You can feel the subtle tension. For every person enchanted by the glow, another mutters that electric light is harsh, unnatural, even sinful. After all, wasn't the cycle of day and night part of divine order? Some churches warn against staying up late with novels when God clearly intended sleep. Yet the glow spreads, irresistible. Perhaps electricity itself carried temptation, humming through wires, whispering that more hours could always be stolen from the night. There is also the question of safety. Fire once terrified homeowners, but at least they knew how it worked. Flames consumed wood, simple enough. Electricity was invisible, mysterious, and dangerous in ways most people barely understood. Newspapers reported deaths by electrocution, fires sparked by faulty wires, entire barns lit up in accidental blazes. Even so, people kept installing switches because the lure of light was greater than fear. Historians often wonder whether it was necessity or simply wonder that drove adoption, whether electricity conquered through logic or through sheer enchantment. Probably both, because when a child sees a dark room suddenly filled with light, reason is hardly the first reaction. The air inside such homes feels different, cleaner, lighter, though the faint smell of kerosene sometimes lingers, a ghost of the older world. Shadows fall sharper, books gleam more invitingly, and time itself seems to stretch, elastic, across the new hours purchased from the night. And yet, houses remain humble. Walls are thin, insulation is poor, and winters bite hard. The warmth of the glowing bulb is only psychological, not physical. People still huddle under heavy quilts, fires still roar in hearths, and when the wind howls, it sneaks right under the doorframe. But the radio remains, steady, pulling them together. An announcer's voice declares baseball scores, or a crooner sings a love song. Children press closer, parents lean in, and for a moment the house feels less isolated, less small. That wooden box collapses distance, binding the household to the larger nation. The country itself feels smaller, tighter, as if voices and music were the first invisible highways. You find yourself listening to letting the hum of static blur into the gentle rhythm of a voice. The room dims around you, shadows dancing at the edge of lamplight, and the faint smell of ozone from the wires hangs in the air. It is imperfect, sometimes fickle, but undeniably alive with change. The world inside this home is both old and new, familiar and uncanny, a place balanced on the hinge of modernity, and as you settle into the creaking chair, the bulb glowing faintly overhead, you realize how fragile this progress feels. Tomorrow, the lamp might sputter, the radio might fall silent, the wires might fail. But tonight, for this family, the room glows with the promise of a future just beginning to hum. The hum of the radio fades as the house grows quiet, the bulb overhead buzzing faintly, but outside, night carries a different rhythm. The streets hold secrets, and if you follow the faint vibration of jazz slipping through alleyways, you find yourself pressing against a door that looks like it belongs to a hardware store. Or maybe a tailor's shop. No sign, just a knock, a pause, and the squeak of hinges as someone eyes you suspiciously before letting you in. This is prohibition, and officially, alcohol is as forbidden as smuggling Wi-Fi passwords from your neighbor. But humans are inventive creatures. Tell them they cannot drink, and suddenly every backroom, every basement, every cleverly disguised soda fountain turns into a temple of gin and jazz. The place you step into smells faintly of wood polish, sweat, and that sweet burn of bootleg liquor. The irony hits you outside. Preachers and politicians trumpet temperance as the cure for social ills. Yet inside these hidden rooms, glasses clinked merrily. The government imagines a sober, orderly nation, but what they get is more crime, more chaos, and the birth of an entire underground nightlife. Imagine banning coffee today and expecting people to just shrug and sip water instead. You can practically hear the hiss of espresso machines working overtime in someone's basement in the speakeasy. The music is alive, brass trumpets bursting, the piano stumbling into syncopation, and drums tapping like restless fingers. Women with bobbed hair sway, dresses shimmering, and men in suits lean too close across small tables, whispering louder than they realize. The air is thick with smoke, laughter, and the constant shuffle of feet. Every few minutes, someone glances nervously at the door. Raids happen, though usually with enough warning for everyone to scatter, leaving behind only broken glasses and the lingering echo of music and the drinks. They are not the carefully crafted cocktails you know today, with Instagram filters and orange zest curls. No, these are rough, fiery concoctions, mixed more to disguise the taste of bad liquor than to delight the palate. Bathtub gin, homemade moonshine, bottles smuggled in from Canadiche glass, a gamble between euphoria and blindness. Yet people drink, cheerfully ignoring the risks, because rebellion tastes better than caution. Of course, not everyone joins in. Across town, soda shops thrive, bright and wholesome, offering root beer floats and sundaes. Teenagers gather at counters, straws clinking in tall glasses, pretending the fizz is enough. The divide is stark. One world dancing illegally through midnight, another trying to sip innocence with a cherry on top. Sometimes the two even blur, soda shops doubling as fronts for liquor, where a certain nod gets you something stronger slipped under the counter. You glance around and notice how prohibition shapes the very mood of the decade. It gives the nights a sharper edge, a thrill of secrecy. Police wagons clatter down the street. Gangsters rise from obscurity to power. Fortunes are made on barrels of forbidden drink. What was supposed to bring morality instead births legends of speakeasies, bootleggers, and jazz. It is almost comical, the way human behavior sidesteps rules. Law says no, but laughter, music, and glasses say yes. And those who enforce the rules, their reputations are just as slippery. Some agents smash barrels and pose proudly for photographs, while others turn a blind eye for the right bribe. Historians still argue whether the true legacy of prohibition lies in its failure or in how it accidentally modernized crime, creating syndicates and networks that outlived the law itself. You could say America learned that legislating morality is like trying to outlaw midnight. It will come anyway. Creeping back with a grin, the scene grows hazy with smoke. You imagine the nervous thrill of sipping something forbidden, the clatter of glasses, the sudden hush when someone thinks the police might be near. Your pulse quickens, though you are just an observer. Outside, the streets carry faint echoes, jazz spilling from cracks in doors, as though the entire city is humming a tune it refuses to silence. And yet, there is a strange coziness here. Maybe it is the dim lighting, or the way strangers lean together, united in secrecy. The more illegal it feels, the warmer the bonds become. People laugh louder, dance harder, cling to each other as if the next knock on the door could scatter them forever. It is not just drinking, it is defiance poured into a glass. Somewhere nearby, a group of young men in fedoras unload crates from a truck, bottles hidden under sacks of potatoes. A policeman strolls by, pretends not to see, his pocket suddenly heavier with cash. In the distance, a car backfires, sounding almost like gunfire, and for a moment you wonder how much danger hides beneath the glamour. Prohibition does not just fuel jazz and cocktails. It fuels a darker rise of violence, rival gangs fighting for territory. Each bullet a punctuation mark in this strange national experiment. But here, in this moment, the danger only sharpens the thrill. You sit at a small table, the wood sticky under your hand, and listen as the singer croons into the smoky air. Her voice is soft, almost like a lullaby, though the lyrics wink at rebellion. The room sways gently, laughter softens, and time slows, as though the speakeasy exists outside the law, outside the ordinary rhythm of the world. And as you close your eyes, the music seeps into you, mingling with the taste of forbidden sweetness. The hum of electricity you left behind in the family home feels far away now. Here, the night belongs to secrets, to jazz, to the clink of glass against glass. The smoky speakeasy fades behind you, the last notes of jazz still clinging like perfume in your ears. And suddenly morning barges in, because no matter how much gin the night promised, the sun still demands its tribute. You stumble into the industrial rhythm of America's workday, and it does not care about your hangover. The air smells different here. Coal, dust and oil cling to everything, turning even bright mornings into a permanent grey. You hear it before you see it, factories pounding out their chorus. Metal on metal, gears grinding, hammers striking, the endless heartbeat of progress. It is a music of its own, less playful than jazz, but just as defining of the era. Factories are the true speakeasies of daylight. Set no one sneaks in for fun inside. The scene feels alive, but punishing. Men and women stand shoulder to shoulder, hands blackened with grease, their eyes fixed on machines that never blink. A row of typewriters clatters in an office nearby, fingers hammering like tiny pistons, each letter a promise of modernity. You listen to the sound, sharp and relentless, like 1,000 woodpeckers on caffeine. There's no backspace key, no undue button mistakes are inked forever. Imagine sending an email today where a typo is carved into stone and hand-delivered to your boss. Suddenly spell check feels like sorcery. Factories run on sweat, but also on hope. Immigrants pour in from ships, dreams tucked into suitcases that carry little else. They step off crowded boats only to step into crowded workshops, trading one form of chaos for another. And yet, they come willingly, because even endless hours at the machine promise more than the emptiness they left behind. You see faces from Italy, Poland, Ireland, Mexico all blending into the great industrial hum of the city. The American dream, at this point, is more about not losing a finger in the gears than buying a white picket fence. Children scurry here too. Yes, despite reformers shouting and laws scribbled into existence, child labor still lingers like a bad habit. A boy no taller than your shoulder carries buckets, his face already wearing the expression of someone twice his age. A girl threads bobbins in a textile mill, quick fingers darting dangerously close to the worry machine. You almost want to tell them to go home. But home might be a tenement room crammed with 6 other people, the rent due yesterday. Childhood here isn't swing sets and cartoons, it's paychecks barely big enough to buy bread. Yet, industry also breeds wonder. Skyscrapers claw the sky, taller each year. Rivets hammered by men who eat lunch, sitting casually on steel beams dangling hundreds of feet above the street. The typewriter clatter you heard earlier turns into stacks of paper. Contracts, novels, entire lives documented at a speed the quill never dreamed of. The pace of work is brutal, yes, but the products begin to change the world. Cars roll off assembly lines faster than anyone thought possible. Sewing machines hum in homes. And even the humblest worker begins to touch the edges of modern convenience. Still, the human cost hangs heavy. 12-hour days are common. Weekends are a luxury. And safety regulations are more suggestion than guarantee. A factory floor in 1925 makes your modern office cubicle look like a spa retreat. No ergonomic chairs, no HR department with stress relief workshops. Here, you work until your body says no, and even then, someone might still expect you back tomorrow. Complaining to management. That's a quick way to find yourself unemployed. You think your boss micromanages. Try one who literally watches you from a catwalk with a stopwatch. Unions begin to grow. Voices rising above the machine clatter, demanding shorter hours, safer conditions. The radical dream of not dying at work strikes spark, sometimes violent, sometimes triumphant. Each one echoing through the streets with chants and the stomp of tired boots. Historians often point out that this tension between labor and profit, between safety and speed, helped shape modern rights. Whether it was bravery, desperation, or just sheer exhaustion that pushed workers to fight back remains a question tangled in the smoke of picket lines. And then there's the rhythm of the city itself. As factories roar, offices hum, typewriters never sleep, paperwork piles high, and secretaries move swiftly in and out of doors, arms full of files. The sound of clacking keys bleeds into the street where delivery boys run, shoes pounding on cobblestones, dodging carts and cars alike. Work doesn't just live inside walls, spills everywhere. You feel it in the sharp smell of ink, the weight of ledgers, the grime under fingernails, the exhaustion in faces pressed against streetcar windows at the end of the day. Yet somehow, amid all this, there is pride. Pride in wages, however small, pride in feeding families, pride in surviving another day without losing more than a glove to the machines. A tired woman, apron still stained from her shift, smiles faintly as she buys bread on the way home. A boy, soot on his cheeks, kicks a ball down the alley after 12 hours on the floor, and still laughs. Life is not easy, but it is undeniably alive. You walk through it, feeling the pulse of progress thudding through your chest. The jazz of the night is wild rebellion, but the roar of industry is stubborn survival. Both carry America forward in different rhythms, one syncopated, one relentless. And as the sun begins to dip, smoke curling orange in the fading light, you realize that all of this, the sweat, the struggle, the steel's what sets the stage for the small pleasures that follow. Because after 12 hours of typewriter clatter and factory hammers, the thought of a 5-cent candy or a fizzy soda feels like a miracle. Work grinds down the body, yes, but it sharpens the hunger for joy. And so, As the last whistle of the factory echoes, you catch the faintest scent of sugar drifting on the breeze, teasing you toward the comfort of treats waiting just around the corner. You let your feet carry you from the clatter of machines and typewriters into a quieter corner of life. The kind of corner that smells faintly sweet, like something pulled straight from childhood memory. Food has always been a mirror of its time, and in America of a century ago, the reflection is both humble and surprisingly inventive. It is not just about survival, though plenty of families knew that hunger hovered close. It is also about comfort, about ritual, about the little luxuries tucked into pockets and wrapped in wax paper. Picture a store shelf with neat rows of candy bars, each costing 5 cents. 5 cents? Today that will not even cover the tax on a bottle of water. But back then it brought you a small rectangle of joy that melted across your tongue while you walked home from school or trudged home from work. Kids would press sticky coins into a shopkeeper's hand and walk out feeling richer than kings. And those shopkeepers, well, they were probably thrilled at how sugar was keeping business alive, even during lean years. The irony, of course, is that dentists also kept busy, so really, the candy industry was a job creator all the way down the line. Step into a soda fountain, and you would see a different kind of stage. Marble counters shining under round lights. Teenagers perched on stools, spinning slowly while syrup and fizz turned into frothy drinks. Root beer floats, chocolate phosphates, a whole universe of flavors that somehow seemed magical when poured from shiny chrome spouts. It was the hangout spot before Starbucks existed. Though instead of Wi-Fi, you got a sticky floor and the occasional gossip whispered between sips. If you wanted to impress someone, you invited them out for a soda. A 5-cent date. Cheap and sweet. Try pulling that off today without a raised eyebrow. Yet not every kitchen smelled like sugar and fizz. Walk into a modest family home on a Sunday evening and you might find a chicken roasting, potatoes bubbling, pies cooling by the window. The Sunday dinner was almost sacred, a pause in the week when families gathered together, even if the food was plain. Bread was sliced thick, butter spread carefully, and if there was enough meat to go around, no one dared complain. The act of eating together was part nourishment, part ritual, a rhythm that gave the week its heartbeat. But here is where it gets interesting. Diet fads, believe it or not, were not invented in the 21st century. People back then swore by strange rules and remedies that promised health, vigor, and the body of your dreams. One of the more peculiar trends was the idea of chewing your food dozens of times before swallowing. Yes, people really counted their chews, as though jaw exercise alone might unlock immortality. Imagine a whole dining room of people silently crunching away, determined to out-chew one another. Today we roll our eyes at juice cleansers, but honestly, it is the same melody, just played on a different instrument. Some households still cooked with recipes that leaned heavily on canned goods, as factories churned them out faster than ever before. Canned salmon, canned peas, canned everything, really. It was convenient, a modern miracle, even if the flavor often resembled the can itself. Housewives were encouraged to embrace this industrial bounty, told that a modern kitchen should gleam with efficiency. Yet many clung stubbornly to traditional methods, because there is only so much love you can pour into a can opener. The balance between old and new played out on the dinner table every night in immigrant neighborhoods. The smells drifting out of kitchens told even richer stories. Garlic, spices, stews simmering for hours, foods that seemed exotic to native-born Americans. But for these families, were threads back to the countries they had left behind. Children grew up with two sets of flavors, learning that food was more than nutrition. It was memory, identity, sometimes even rebellion. A plate of pasta or a dish of dumplings said quietly, "This is who we are," even if the world outside sometimes insisted otherwise. Alcohol, of course, had become a forbidden flavor, at least on paper. But people are endlessly creative when denied their pleasures. Homebrewed beer and bathtub gin slipped into kitchens alongside bread dough and stews. Some meals were washed down with something stronger than milk, though it was wise not to ask exactly what you were drinking. The law said no, but the clink of glasses in back rooms suggested otherwise. It is easy, in our time, to imagine their meals as quaint, as though the past was a sepia-toned picnic. But the truth is both harsher and more tender. Food was hard-won, sometimes scarce, sometimes barely enough. Yet into that scarcity people poured celebration. They stretched recipes, invented dishes from scraps, and taught children to savor what little they had. It was not always romantic, but it was always human. Historians still puzzle over how quickly soda fountains became temples of youth culture, almost overnight. Some suggest it was the novelty of the bubbles. Others point to the clever marketing that turned fizzy sugar water into a social event. Whatever the cause, the soda fountain became a symbol of modern life, standing at the crossroads between innocence and indulgence. And here you are, drifting between the aisles of candy and the hush of family suppers, between the shine of canned goods and the stubborn warmth of homemade bread. The past folds open like a recipe card, smudged and worn, but still legible. You can almost taste the sweetness, almost feel the heavy satisfaction of a meal hard-earned. Take a breath here. Let the steam of those kitchens settle around you. The clatter of work is not far behind. The echo of typewriters and factory whistles still lingers. Yet for a moment, you are in the gentle, messy heart of the everyday, where food carried more than flavor. It carried hope, pride, and sometimes just enough sugar to make the world feel softer. You lean back, full from that Sunday supper, maybe still with a bit of sugar sticking to your fingertips, and you hear it, a low hum, faint static, and then the distant swell of music that does not belong to the parlor piano. Entertainment has begun to change, and America is beginning to sway with it. Picture yourself in a darkened theater. The air smells faintly of popcorn and dust, the kind of dust that tickles your nose if you breathe too deeply. A silent movie flickers across the screen, black and white shadows leaping larger than life. There is no dialogue, just exaggerated expressions and words splashed across title cards. Yet the audience leans forward, entranced. A piano pounds away in the corner, improvising excitement, sorrow, or laughter, depending on the scene. People laugh at jokes that are so broad you could drive a Model T through them, and somehow it works. Today we complain about buffering when a streaming service pauses for half a second. Back then, your lag was the pianist forgetting which scene he was in. Step outside and wander into a vaudeville hall. The stage is alive with performers, singers belting tunes, acrobats twisting their bodies, comedians cracking jokes with accents thicker than the smoke that fills the room. It is messy, loud, unpredictable, and very human. Families sit elbow to elbow, strangers sharing the same laughter, the same groans at bad puns. Vaudeville was variety at its rawest, a place where you could see Shakespeare 1 minute and a dancing duck the next. Imagine explaining TikTok to them. They would nod and say, "Oh, we did that first, only with feathers and a live orchestra." But the real revolution is not in the theaters or the halls. It is in your living room, a wooden box, large and proud, humming faintly with static and then bursting with sound. The radio. Suddenly, the world stretches into your home. Jazz bands play through the airwaves, crooners sing sweetly into the night, and announcers talk as though they are sitting right beside you. Families gather around, chairs pulled close, faces lit by the soft glow of a lamp. The silence between songs is filled with crackles, like tiny ghosts whispering. Radio is intimate, immediate, and strangely powerful. It makes you feel less alone, even when you are sitting in the same old armchair you always have. And then, the jazz. Oh, the jazz. The heartbeat of the decade. Horns blaring, drums skipping, bass thumping like a restless foot. It is wild, improvised, alive. Jazz does not ask permission, it just pulls you to your feet. In smoky clubs hidden behind unmarked doors, young men and women dance until sweat makes their collars stick. The Charleston sweeps through cities like a fever. Skirts swish, beads shimmer, shoes tap in frantic rhythm. The older generation watches, horrified, convinced this is the end of civilization. Honestly, they thought shaking your shoulders was a moral downfall. Imagine what they would say about today's dance floors. Jazz carries with it more than sound. It carries rebellion, freedom, something new born out of African American communities that reshaped the entire culture. Musicians bent notes, stretched rhythms, played with time itself, as though music could breathe. This was not background music. This was the pulse of a new identity, one that did not care for Victorian stiffness or polite restraint. But let's be honest, not everyone was out in smoky clubs. Some folks preferred the soda fountain jukebox, or a neighborhood barn dance, or simply humming along to the radio after supper. Entertainment stretched from the big cities to the small towns, each finding their own way to laugh, to sing, to forget the grind of the day. If your idea of fun was balancing on a unicycle while juggling, there was probably a stage for you somewhere. If it was humming a hymn in the quiet of a church hall, that too was entertainment, in its own slower key. Historians still argue over whether the explosion of jazz and film was a cultural earthquake or simply the natural result of technology. Meeting restless youth. Some say the radio shrank the country, binding strangers into one listening audience. Others insist it fractured the culture, making young people chase new thrills while their parents clung to old traditions. The truth, as usual, probably lies somewhere in the middle, somewhere between the flicker of a movie reel and the hiss of a radio dial. Imagine ending your day not with doom scrolling, but with a night at the movies. A nickel for the ticket, laughter filling the room. Or imagine cranking the radio knob, leaning in as though the singer might step out of the wooden box and join you for supper. These were the rhythms of escape, the lullabies of a nation shifting into modernity. And yet, there was always tension. Entertainment promised joy, but it also threatened order. Jazz clubs were raided, theaters scolded for indecency, radio programs censored for daring to say too much. Every laugh, every dance, every note carried both freedom and risk, which is probably why people loved it even more. Nothing tastes sweeter than what you are told to avoid. So here you sit, swaying in your chair, the faint echo of a trumpet sliding through the night, a flicker of light playing across your imagination. The world is not just working and eating and obeying rules. It is also music, laughter, and the strange comfort of being carried away. Entertainment is not a luxury. It is the thread that weaves the weary day into something softer, and while you let your body loosen into that rhythm, while you hum along with a tune you cannot quite place, you feel the gentle shift toward what comes next. Because behind every song, every flickering frame, every laugh that shakes a crowded hall, there is the steady drum of daily life, waiting to be picked back up. You leave the glow of the theatre and the smoky swing of the jazz hall, and suddenly the air feels quieter, softer, like you have stepped back onto your own street. The music still hums in your ears, but now you hear the creak of porch steps, the slam of a screen door, and the unmistakable sound of neighbors' voices carrying farther than you would ever want. Welcome home. Inside, the family sits gathered in the living room. The father rests heavy in his chair, paper spread open, pipe smoke curling lazily into the lamplight. The mother fusses with some bit of sewing, eyes flicking now and then toward the children sprawled on the rug. Maybe they are playing a board game, maybe just poking each other until someone yelps and gets scolded. You do not see a television here, not yet. Entertainment in this house comes from conversation, small chores, and the occasional radio broadcast if the signal is strong. You cannot simply escape to a bedroom with a smartphone. Your privacy is basically non-existent, and your family knows exactly where you are at all times. Horrifying, isn't it? Family routines are steady, predictable. Breakfast together, dinner together, Sunday service together. If you tried to sneak off for alone time, someone would notice immediately. You want to brood like a moody teenager. Good luck. The walls are thin, and your mother can hear every sigh, every whisper, and probably even your thoughts. And then there are the neighbors. Oh, the neighbors. Their curtains twitch like clockwork. A screen door bangs 3 houses down, and by the time you get inside your own kitchen, someone is already telling your mother about it. Gossip is faster than electricity, more reliable than the postman, and certainly more entertaining. Who is courting whom? Who stayed too long at the soda shop? Who has been seen sneaking into a speakeasy? It all circulates like air, and it clings to you whether you like it or not. Historians like to argue about whether small-town gossip built community bonds or just made life suffocating. Some say it kept people accountable, a way of policing morality without police. Others argue it created nothing but whispers and misery. You sit there listening, nodding politely, while secretly wondering how long it will take until your haircut becomes the scandal of the week. Yet there is comfort too. Neighbors may judge, but they also help. A pie carried across a fence, a borrowed cup of sugar, someone dropping by to check on you after an illness. Today, we call it community support. Back then, it was just Tuesday. When a family fell on hard times, everyone knew within hours, and help, or at least advice, sometimes very unsolicited, arrived quickly. The homes themselves tell part of the story. Wooden porches sag a little under rocking chairs. Kitchens smell of bread baking. Laundry flaps on lines stretched between backyards. Bedrooms are shared, often by multiple children. Privacy measured in inches rather than yards. And if you think the Wi-Fi signal is bad in your house, imagine living with a single bathroom for 6 people. Patience was not optional. Children grew up under watchful eyes, but also under the unspoken freedom of the street. They played outside until dusk, roaming in packs, inventing games with sticks, chalk, and whatever scraps could be found. No helmets, no hand sanitizer, no parental tracking apps. Scraped knees were badges of honor, and nobody worried about a little dirt. If you came home without at least one bruise, were you even playing properly? And through all of this, the rhythm of family life pressed on. Supper at the table, a prayer, maybe a little music, maybe just a quiet nod to each other before bed. The world outside might be roaring with jazz and industry, but at home, things followed their own steady pace. You belonged to a network tighter than any social media feed, except this one did not have an button. Don't think about it. Today you can live in an apartment for years without knowing the name of the person next door. A century ago, you could not sneeze without half the block discussing whether it was hay fever or a sign of poor moral hygiene. Privacy is lovely, but loneliness is its price. Back then, loneliness was harder to find, for better or worse. The truth is, families and neighbors created the framework that everything else rested on. Work, industry, politics, even jazz, all of it flowed back into the home at the end of the day. And as much as you might roll your eyes at the nosy neighbor lady, when your lamp flickered out or your child needed watching, she would be the first one at your door. So you sit here, listening to the quiet hum of your household, the faint whisper of gossip drifting across fences like smoke, and you realize this is the heartbeat of daily life. Loud enough to annoy, close enough to comfort, ordinary enough to be forgotten, and yet essential. And with that, you feel the steady pull of the world beyond the picket fences. The chatter of neighbors is only the surface. Beneath it, voices are rising, debates are stirring, and the promise of progress is being tested. Because while families gather around dinner tables, the country itself is gathering around ballot boxes and speeches, preparing to argue, to change. To dream, you can almost hear the gossip die down as conversations turn toward something heavier. The neighbor who was just scolding you about your muddy shoes now leans closer to whisper about politics. And in 1920s America, politics is not just a matter of dry speeches. It feels electric, full of arguments, and for some, finally a chance to be heard. Picture the scene. It is election day, and for the very first time, women step into polling places with ballots in hand. Skirts brushing the dusty floor, hats pinned firmly in place, some with trembling excitement, some with quiet determination. The 19th Amendment has just opened doors that were nailed shut for centuries. Imagine standing in that moment, half the country's population suddenly given a voice that could shape laws. You may be used to clicking a screen and complaining about politics in the comments section, but back then, just standing in line to vote was revolutionary. The men who scoffed and said it would never happen had to swallow their pride and probably a few cigars as they watched their wives march into the booths. Debates swirl not just around women's votes, but around the stubborn beast of prohibition. Remember the speakeasies you tiptoed into at night? Now imagine the shouting matches in daylight. Neighbors splitting over whether alcohol was the devil's tool or simply the best way to survive another family dinner. Churches rang with fiery sermons, politicians waved fists, and meanwhile, the bootleggers quietly got richer by the day. You can almost hear the sarcasm in the air. Yes, let's ban alcohol. That will definitely make people stop drinking. Right, about as effective as banning dessert to keep people from sneaking cookies after. Supper, the American dream itself, seems up for debate too. Factories roar, cities grow, radios buzz, cars multiply, and everyone says opportunity is waiting just down the road. But not everyone gets the same share of the dream. Immigrant families still crowd into tenements, workers grind long hours, and racial tensions crackle beneath the jazz and parades. Politicians shout about progress, but progress is uneven, stitched together like a patchwork quilt that only covers some shoulders while leaving others in the cold. Yet the hope is real. Airplanes buzz overhead, their shadows crossing city streets. Trains thunder across plains, carrying goods and dreams alike. It feels like the country is racing forward, even if some are left clutching the railing at the back. Speeches swell with optimism, a chicken in every pot, a car in every garage, though if you look closely, you realize not everyone is invited to the feast. Historians still debate whether this period was truly progressive or just a glittering mask hiding inequality. Some say it was the birth of modern America, where democracy expanded and innovation surged. Others call it fragile, a house built on sand, wobbling under the weight of poverty and prejudice. The truth lies somewhere in between, in the awkward dance between promise and disappointment. And through it all, ordinary people argue across dinner tables. A father insists the country is on the right path. A daughter who just cast her first vote insists he is blind. A mother mutters that the price of bread still matters more than speeches. Politics is not just something that happens in marble buildings. It is woven into gossip, into family feuds, into the hum of daily life. Think about it. Today, we scroll through endless headlines, half distracted, barely pausing between memes. Back then, a single newspaper headline could set a whole town buzzing for weeks, and the debates were not locked behind screens. They were loud, face to face, spit flying, neighbors leaning over fences to declare exactly what they thought about the mayor. No muting, no blocking, no safe distance. Just you, your voice, and everyone else's opinion. And despite the arguments, despite the cracks, there is a strange sense of momentum. America is stretching, pulling, stumbling maybe, but moving forward. You can feel it in the way young women cut their hair, in the way cars crowd the streets, in the way radios speak across the night. The country is learning to walk in new shoes, awkwardly, noisily, but step by step. So here you are, caught in the middle of voices that never seem to stop, of dreams that keep shifting, of progress that feels both thrilling and fragile. You feel the noise swirl around you like wind, and yet you sense something softer beyond it, something pulling your gaze upward. Because while debates rage and ballots drop into boxes, the world itself is changing shape. Airplanes skim the horizon, towers rise higher, and everyone begins to wonder what comes next. You tilt your head back and watch a sky that has become suddenly louder. Once upon a time, the heavens were for birds and prayers. Now they buzz with the uncertain hum of airplanes, fragile things made of canvas and daring. Children run into fields just to point at the contraptions, their mouths open wide as if a biplane with a second coming of magic itself. Adults squint, shading their eyes, half in awe and half in terror. Because if a horse can throw you, what might a flying machine do when it decides to stop pretending it belongs in the sky? The streets beneath are just as restless. At night, electric lights burn steadier, pushing away shadows that once crept into every corner. 100 years ago, the promise was that electricity would free people from fear and toil, and in a way it did. Yet here, in the 1920s, wires hang across neighborhoods like spiderwebs, spun too fast, buzzing faintly. You can almost hear the optimism sizzling through them, the conviction that the future is only a switch away. And honestly, they were not entirely wrong. The glow feels like a heartbeat of progress, and you stand there, pretending not to miss the quiet of lamplight. pretending not to think about how your modern phone charger tangles the same way their wires once did. In living rooms, radios sit proud on polished cabinets, their static carrying voices across the nation. Families gather close, leaning in as though the newsreader were a relative shouting through a keyhole. Think of the intimacy, strangers talking into boxes, entire households falling silent to listen. And you, of course, complain today if your podcast takes longer than 5 seconds to buffer. Patience is an endangered species, and perhaps it already was back then. After all, when you've tasted electricity and automobiles, when you've seen machines lift from the earth, how long can you stand waiting? Hope was the flavor of the decade. People genuinely believed tomorrow would be brighter, faster, easier. The world had just survived a war that felt like the end of all things, and the survivors looked forward with both relief and defiance. Airplanes were proof that mankind had not just endured, but learned to soar. Cars rolling down Main Street were symbols that life could keep moving no matter what. Skyscrapers rose, and with each new floor, the idea of limits shrank a little smaller. Standing beneath them, you can almost feel the collective inhalation, the sense that maybe, just maybe, the only way was up. And yet, tucked behind that optimism is a nervous whisper. Progress had teeth. Factories roared, the stock market ticked like a fever, and the pace of life sped so quickly that many feared being left behind. Some grumbled that radios would ruin conversation, that automobiles would destroy neighborhoods, that women voting would unravel society itself. History has a way of smiling at these worries, at least until you realize how familiar they sound. Swap radios for smartphones, swap automobiles for self-driving cars, and suddenly the past looks uncomfortably like your own reflection. Perhaps the real invention is not technology, but the eternal tradition of panicking about it. Gazing toward the horizon of 1929, people debated whether this momentum could last. Some believed the good times would roll forever, champagne flowing, jazz blaring. Others muttered about cracks forming, about prices climbing too high. Historians today still go in circles about whether the crash that came was inevitable or preventable. But the truth for those living then was simpler. They stood on the edge of a decade, unable to see the cliff that lay ahead. And isn't that always the way with futures? You only know how dangerous they were once you've safely, or not so safely, stumbled past. So, here you are, standing in the shoes of someone in 1925, looking ahead with both excitement and dread. You breathe the air thick with coal, smoke, and perfume. Hear the music leaking from dance halls. Feel the tickle of curiosity about what the next year might bring. It is easy to laugh at their innocence, at their stubborn belief that technology alone could solve everything. Yet be careful with that laughter, because the echo sounds suspiciously like your own. You, too, look at glowing screens and flying machines and tell yourself the future will be different this time. As the night deepens, the city quiets only a little. Somewhere an engine coughs and sputters, a reminder that progress still trips on its own feet. A radio croons faintly through the walls, a jazz singer's voice carried across miles, soft and smoky. A breeze drifts in through a window, carrying both the chill of evening and the warmth of possibility. You close your eyes, letting the hum of the future wrap around you. A blanket woven of static and dreams, and maybe that is the gentlest truth of all. The future has always been a bedtime story, whispered by inventions, sung by machines, promised by voices we strain to hear. You are not so different from the family gathered by their radio, waiting to be told that tomorrow will be brighter. You are not so different from the child running barefoot to watch an airplane scrape across the sky. The years shift, fashions fade, machines evolve. But the longing to peek around the corner of time remains, unchanged. So let the hum of those old engines and the flicker of those first lights settle into your breathing. Inhale the optimism of a century ago. Exhale the worries that still cling today. Picture yourself under that sky, with airplanes buzzing above and skyscrapers climbing beside you, with a future just out of reach but already beckoning. And as your eyelids grow heavy, let those voices of 1925 fade into the background. Let the jazz soften, let the world dissolve into the quietest part of night. The future they dreamed is the present you live, and the future you dream will be someone else's present one day. For now, though you need only this silence, this drifting, this gentle surrender to rest. The streets empty, the radio's quiet, the airplanes vanish into clouds, and the city finally lies still enough for you to sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.